speak about the Gospel of Matthew, verse by verse study. And today's topic is the genealogy of Christ. So, before going to the topic, I want to give you just a little bit of background. We'll begin with the first portion. During the time when Christ was born, Israel was under Rome's dominion. In many ways, Rome persecuted Israel. One aspect of the oppression of Rome was the crushing taxation system. It was a very cruel system at that time. The crushing taxation system was particularly two types. It was poll tax, which is known as income tax in these days, and ground tax, which is known as property tax in these days. The Roman senators, who were very wealthy in the city, they will buy the right from the Rome government for 5 years to collect tax from the nation of Israel. They are called publicans, and they will hire slaves and countrymen, and they will collect the money from their own people and give it to the foreign people, and some will overtax them for their own gain. The classic example for this is Zacchaeus. These tax collectors or publicans were ranked with Herods, heathen, highwaymen, robbers, and murderers because no one used to like them. Now, one of these publicans who worked for wealthy Roman senators was a man named Matthew. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 9 says, "As Jesus passed forth from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax office. And he said unto him, Follow me. And he rose and followed him. And when Jesus spoke to him, he immediately followed him without even asking a second question. I guess he might know Jesus. He might have listened his speeches. He may have been a religious man, honest man, and he didn't retribute to people as Zacchaeus did. The Gospel of Matthew is written to show the story of salvation, and Jesus is the Christ, the predicted Messiah, the King of the Jews, rejected by his people, accepted by Gentiles, will return to reign as a King of kings and Lord of lords. So this is given in this Gospel of Matthew. It is the story of the King who comes, the King who is rejected, and the King who will return. First of all, Matthew deals with the King revealed. The first thing you notice in Matthew's Gospel is that Christ is presented as a king. There's just no question about it. The person Jesus is painted in royal colors, which means he is represented as king in this Gospel. His ancestry traced from royal line. His birth is dreaded by rival king. Wise men offer their royal gifts. John the Baptist declares that his kingdom is at hand. Even in his temptation, Satan has offered the kingdom of the world, an acknowledgement that he has a right to rule. His great message on the mount was setting forth the laws of this kingdom. His miracles were his royal credentials. His parables were called the mysteries of the kingdom. He was hailed as the son of David. He makes a royal entry into Jerusalem. And while facing the cross, he predicted his future reign. His last words are a kingly claim as he says, All authority hath been given unto me. Go you therefore. And so Matthew presents him as a king revealed. And second, this book deals with another character, the king rejected. Matthew is the gospel of rejection. Before he was born, his mother was in danger of being rejected by Joseph. At his birth, Jerusalem was troubled and Herod sought his life. On the plains of Bethlehem, no angel sings, but mothers were weeping in anguish as their babies are being slaughtered. He was hurried to live in Nazareth for 30 years. His parables indicates that his kingdom would not be accepted in this age. And even in his death he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Those who passed through Jesus used to revile and mock him, and they hired soldiers to lie even about his resurrection. So the third thing is the second coming of Jesus Christ. When you get into chapter 24 and 25, He will come in the clouds with great glory. He'll ultimately reign. And so it's a gospel of revelation of a king, the rejection of the king, the return of the king. But to begin with, let's look at chapter 1. Let's go to today's topic, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 to 16. If anybody is to accept that he is a king, then it must start with the proof that he comes from the royal line. There was a royal line in Israel, and it came through David. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, God said through the prophet Nathan to David, through the loins of David, the king would reign in Israel and set up an eternal kingdom. That was never fulfilled in Solomon. And so they waited and waited and waited for one born of the seed of David to fulfill the prophecy. And so if Jesus is the king, it must be established. It must be shown that he is the descendant of David, that he has the royal genealogy. Now that is precisely what verse 1 to 17 speaks. Let's read them. Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 17. The book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab, Aminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth, Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Solomon begot Rehoboam, Rehoboam begot Abijah, and Abijah begot Asa. Asa begot Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat begot Joram, and Joram begot Uzziah. Uzziah begot Jotham, and Jotham begot Ahaz, and Ahaz begot Hezekiah. Hezekiah begot Manasseh. Manasseh begot Ammon, and Ammon begot Josiah. Josiah begot Jeconiah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begot Shealtiel, and Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel begot Abiud, Abiud begot Eliakim, and Eliakim begot Azor, and Azor begot Zadok. Zadok begot Akim, and Akim begot Eliud. Eliud begot Eleazar, Eleazar begot Mathan, and Mathan begot Jacob, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David until the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations, and from the captivity of Babylon until the Christ are 14 generations. So why do we have all these things? Let me tell you. First of all, the Jews were tenacious about their pedigrees. So what is pedigrees? Pedigrees is nothing but the generations. And if anybody was going to be presented to them as king, it was absolutely essential that he have the pedigree to prove it. For example, after the conquest of Canaan, God promised land flowing with milk and honey to determine your tribe. And according to Numbers chapter 26 and 35, you had to know your family, tribe, father's house to identify your right location in the land. So a pedigree was very important, tribal identification and essential. According to the book of Ruth chapter 3 and 4, under certain circumstances, transfer of property required accurate knowledge of the family tree. God wanted to keep tribal land within the tribe, and so there had to be pedigree. Even in Ezra 2:62 says, these sought their registration among these who were reckoned by genealogy, but they were not found there, and so they were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. After return from Babylon captivity, some claimed to be priests, claiming to be the tribe of Levi. We know God was very serious about who was a priest. Even in the New Testament, Joseph and Mary registered according to their own ancestry in their own place. is given in Luke chapter 2 verse 1 to 4, and even in Romans chapter 11 verse 1 it says, I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid, for I am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Even Apostle Paul told that he is the tribe of Benjamin. To Jewish people, pedigree is very important, and this is why there are at least 50 genealogies in Old Testament. Not only the royal line, the priestly line, but in terms of property transfer and so forth. Now all of this has changed today. Jews today don't know this. They have absolutely no record of their tribal ancestry. Today they can't trace. It is completely vanished. If anybody comes along claiming to be Messiah, he will never be able to prove it. So this is what given in these verses. So in the coming class we will see about the virgin birth of Christ. So see you all in the next video. May God bless these words. Amen.